Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Chronically Questioning podcast. Today I'm speaking with Corinne Vadala. She's another former member of Third Day Worship Center. This is just my little disclaimer to remind you all to keep the comments positive and do not attack this church, the members, or the leadership, because that's not what we do when we're trying to elicit a change. So with that, I hope you enjoy the episode. Bye. I'm here with Corinne Vadala, and you are another ex-member of Third Day Worship Center.
Yes, I am.
And you're here just to tell your story. It's your turn. And what you want people to know.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in church. My parents immigrated here back in the 60s. And so I always grew up in church. My mom was very devout, went to church her whole life. And so I grew up in church.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I was very familiar with the traditions and just how church operated. I always enjoyed going.
Yeah.
And then when I was a teenager, my mom switched denominations. Not faith, but she just wanted something a little bit more. I think she was just looking for something a little bit more charismatic, and somebody introduced her to, a non-denominational type church. So I started to attend Third Day. It was called Frontline back then. It was around 1997.
Oh, wow. That's early.
Yep. 90.
What was your denomination before that?
Catholic. We went to Catholic church.
Hey, that's me. Okay. Sorry. Did you like it at first?
Loved it, actually. Yeah. The music drew me in.
Yeah.
They had a lot of great ministries. They had something that was called, and I was part of it, Ministry of Helps, where you made food for new moms or families that were struggling or whatever. So it was great. I was part of the worship team. I was part of Bible study. I had to be there a lot.
How much?
Twice on Sundays, on Wednesdays. And then when I started some of the ministries, like the worship team, you had to be there for practice as well. And you had to be at every service practice. And it was usually an hour before service and then once throughout the week for about an hour or two. So you had to be committed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How old were you at this time when you started to get more involved with their ministries and the things that they offered?
Oh, I would have been in my 30s.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had my children there.
And you liked it still
at
that point? Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Was it a pretty good community?
It was. There was a lot of people my age that went, young families just starting, whether they were starting their careers or having, babies.
Did your kids like it?
My kids loved it.
Yeah.
Because kids were allowed to, run freely and be part of the service.
Yeah.
We had ministry for the children as well. So my kids always enjoyed it.
That's good. So you had made some friends, I assume?
I did.
Yeah.
I made a couple of very good friends that are still good friends to this day.
And did you do anything outside of the church? Like, how much did it consume your life is what I'd like to know. Like, did you have other things that you did outside of the church? Like, say, one of your kids was on like a basketball team or something, or,
Well, I will say this, when you were part of a ministry, it had to be your life. Like they frowned upon missing, services, whether it was, a whole weekend of revival meetings. But for myself, I wanted my children to be involved in things outside of church. So I made a point of putting them in, whether it was dance or competitive soccer, music. I wanted them to have the outside experience of being part of not just a church community, but yeah, stuff within the city.
Yeah.
And so we did. My children were very much part of. They played competitive soccer. They danced. They took music lessons. We would go to different groups. They played basketball. So I made it a point.
Yeah. How did the leadership feel about that?
You know what? They didn't really say anything to me ever because I had made up my mind that my kids would not just be fully focused on just things going on at the church. I wanted them to be very well rounded. And church was part of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wanted them to experience, other things. Now I was very involved. I did not do much else outside of church.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you start questioning what you were being taught? Did you ever question in the beginning or?
I did have doubts in the beginning. I will say that, but it was very clear from the beginning that you were not to question anything.
What made you feel that way? That you could question things?
Well, just because most of the church held Francis at a very high standard, that he, what he said was, always very biblical. You didn't question him. He was the authority. You could, and I did have an experience once when I did question some things going on in youth group, and I was, in their terms, rebuked for it. But I stood up and I said, no, I have questions and I want answers. These are valid, questions that I have and concerns, and I'm not a bad person for asking. This involves my children, so I was always very protective of my girls.
Yeah.
And anybody, treating them unfairly or anything. And there were some things that I had questioned. So yeah, I did go to leadership, and he finally did listen. He backed down and listened to what I had to say. Yeah. But I think the biggest thing I started to question was, I believe it was in 2014, when one of the leaders came up. It was on a Sunday morning, and he said God had spoken to him early in the wee early hours of the morning, and that the wall, when you walk into the sanctuary, the wall to the left needed to come down. They needed to make that sanctuary bigger for more people, and that he believed that we should be giving, everybody in the congregation should give $1,000 towards that. It was a plea to, give towards this wall coming down, and $1,000 was what you should give over and above your tithe and your offering.
So you're giving your normal tithes and offerings, what percentage of, because I know certain, like the Mormon church, for example, has their members give 10% of what they earn.
Yes, it's 10%.
It's like that as well at Third Day.
Yes,
oh, okay.
10%. And you know what? I believe in those biblical truths of, it's part of your faith. It even talks about it, Leviticus.
Yeah.
It's part of your faith, or, even in Proverbs, honor God with your wealth. So I believe in those principles.
Yeah.
What I don't agree with is how it's brought forward, and how the message is presented. That I always had a problem with. It was always, if you don't give, you will be cursed.
Really?
If you, the bigger the issue in your life, the more you give. If you want people in your life to be saved and you want your kids to serve God, you give. If you want a a job, then you give. Like it was always about giving for everything in your life. You had to give your money. If you were in really huge financial debt, the message was give towards your debt, give your tithes, give a bigger offering if you're in bigger debt.
But what about giving your time though? If someone didn't have enough money, did they ever say, you know what, so-and-so, why don't you start helping with the children's ministry? Or why don't you go with so-and-so and help out at the, you know,
that was all yeah, so that was part of it. But there was no option in the tithe and offering. Like the ministry would just be the additional part. Like, yes, you should be involved. But as soon as you were involved, you had to give your 10% and your offerings. Yeah.
That was when you became like a very committed member like yourself, when you started doing worship team and whatnot.
Yes.
Okay.
I was very faithful in my giving the whole time I had attended. You know, and I was a single mom with a single income, with a mortgage, but I was very faithful. Yeah. And I gave my 10% and plus. So I decided, okay, you know, this is a good cause. I want to see this church expand, and I want to see more people come in, because I believed in that. I believed in that.
Yeah.
I believed in them. So I gave, and so did probably many people. And so that was that. Time went by. It was very exciting, because, you know, we were, you know, constantly waiting to hear what was going to happen. And so many months went by, and I started to question, okay, there's no more talk about this wall.
But yeah, so this was several months, you said?
Many months. I bet you it was probably a good 6 months, if not more. Yeah. So I decided to have a meeting with one of the leaders.
Yeah.
Not Francis himself.
Okay.
Because that would have not been received well. Okay. So I had a meeting with one of the other leaders, very high up leader. And I questioned her on it. And I said, look, myself with, you know, probably, you know, 80% of the church has given towards this cause. And I want to know what's happening.
Yeah.
Just like when I buy something or I put money down, I expect what I put my money down, whether it's a home, whatever it is, I've ordered something, I expect that product or whatever I put my money down to happen, to come to me, right?
That's not an unreasonable thing to ask too, because the whole point of this project was to expand the sanctuary and therefore expand the church, and therefore, you know, by definition, helping more people.
Exactly.
So I don't think that's a valid concern and something to ask about.
Right. And so, you know, we sat together and I expressed my concern, and I just said, I just want to know what's happening at this point. We've heard no more talk for months, and I just want to know. And I went in with, you know, just innocently wanting to just know. I wasn't going in there, you know, on the defense. Like I wasn't going in angry.
Yeah.
I just genuinely wanted to know.
Yeah.
So, and I was told that Francis was praying about it, and that I needed to trust his judgment, and trust that he knew what he was going to do at the right time. And I said, okay, but we were told very specifically we needed to give the money that weekend, because they really needed to start, you know, working on this. And they had even at one point given people, or people had to bring, oh geez, I'm losing my, a hammer. And we hammered that wall down. Like, so we just dented it. We all dented as a symbol that wall was coming down. And then with all the money that they had accumulated that weekend and many months after, that wall was going to come down and they were going to expand that church.
Yeah.
And they could because they've got the property behind.
Yeah.
And it happened.
It didn't happen.
2020. And the wall has never come down.
Wow.
Yeah.
So so it was 6 months, you brought your concern, or around 6 months, you said, you brought your concern. They basically just said to pray about it, and that he was still praying about it.
He was praying about it, and that I just needed to trust the leadership.
And
they knew what they were doing, and I just needed to trust and not question, his decision making. And that's when I began to question. I thought, well, I gave $1,000 of my hard-earned money that I work for above what I give every week, and nothing's happened. And now a year had gone by and there was still no talk and nothing had happened.
wow.
So yeah, that's when I started to really see that things things weren't really what they were.
Did anybody else question this?
You know what? I think a lot of people probably did. No one ever said anything to me. I just began to become more bold, I think, because to me, I mean, it's $1,000. Like,
That's a lot of money.
Well, it is when you are a single income earner and you have a mortgage and 2 children that, you're saving for their university and, other things like other expenses. It's not cheap. And so I didn't have a problem giving it. The problem I had was, okay, we've given towards this. Why is nothing happening now?
Are there any other instances where they said that they needed such and such amount of money to do another project, but it never ended up going through, that you could remember?
Every year they had what was called resurrection seed offering, and it was around Easter time. And the theme of it was because God gave his son, we were to give a sacrificial offering, and it consisted of either 1 week's pay or 1 month's pay, and that was over and above your tithe. And it was, you would write down your prayer requests, and God was going to answer your prayers when you gave that resurrection seed. And the theme, and it was like a build up for like 2 months before. And I remember there were years where they pulled in, I bet you, because they would say how much.
Yeah.
And I bet you it was 100,000 in one service. Yeah. And God was going to answer all those prayers you were believing for when you gave, and it was I mean, some people were giving, 2 weeks pay, 1 week pay, 1 month, whatever it was. Right.
But did they ever say where the money was going? So you're telling me that they said, write down your prayer, give this amount of money or as much money as you can, and God will answer your prayer. But where's that money going? Did you know? Did anybody ask?
Nope. No, I mean, they do have ministries. They have, homes in Guatemala, an orphanage, sorry. And they have other ministries, but 100,000 is a lot in one day.
That is a lot. Wow. Yeah. So when you were doing this though, what was going through your head? Did you think, oh, it's probably just going to go help more people in a third world country? Or, I bet it's probably going to some homeless people. Or were your thoughts, you know what, I need this in my life. I want this job promotion, or example, I want this blessing. So if I do it, I'm going to get that. Because
I never gave hoping for a miracle. I gave because I was faithful. I gave because I enjoyed giving. It wasn't necessarily for God to answer my prayers because that never made sense to me. God owns everything.
Yeah.
So for me, and when I read, whether it was in Proverbs, honor God with your wealth, that's what I wanted to do. I
Yeah.
was, I enjoyed going to church, but when they took big offerings, um, I think for most people, God was going to answer these huge prayers that they had. If they gave, the more they gave, the more God would answer, whether it was, a job or, in their eyes, their family members that were, far away from God. Um, yeah. So, and I, for myself, I never gave for that reason. I gave because I was a giver, and
Yeah.
I wanted to see, I wanted to see change, and that was my motive in giving.
Well, it shows the kind of person you are questioning. Was there anything related to doctrine or theology? Because you grew up Catholic and I grew
I
up Catholic as well.
Yeah.
And
Um,
from what I understand, the doctrines are quite different from evangelical, charismatic, Pentecostal Christianity to Catholicism, in my opinion. It's a different type of worship. It's a different kind of, you
it's a
have to go to
different
a priest to ask for forgiveness. You know what I mean? So
right.
did you ever question the doctrine?
Do you know what I questioned a lot? Everything was fear based. Um, uh, and every every Sunday it was like you were getting bashed over the head for everything. I mean, I don't know how to put it into words, but it was
Yeah.
always everything like you could never give enough, you could never be in church enough, you were, it was like you were never good enough, you could never reach the standard that uh, he was at or the leadership was at, because they had all made it. The rest of us were all going to have to strive, and there was a lot of fear-based preaching, I think.
Yeah.
um, you had to do this in order to get this, and if you didn't do this, you'd be cursed, and if you didn't do that, and if you no, none of us are perfect.
Yeah.
We've all fallen short, we all sin. um that's just human nature, right?
Yeah.
I think um that's when I started to question a lot of things too. It was like, God's not fear, God's love.
Yeah.
And so why am I afraid? Like if I have a certain thought, or if I do this, like things like you shouldn't even hang around with people outside of the church, or if somebody leaves the church, have nothing to do with them because they have done wrong. And I hated that. I thought, but they're still human. Why can't I hang out with them? Why can't I associate with them?
So contradictory to the social rules in society. Just because someone leaves one group or one particular religion, your biologies can't isn't equipped to handle that kind of thing. So it's the natural response for someone to say, but so and so is my friend, I did this with them, they helped me, they did this. But just because they don't believe anymore, it's
But people that left didn't mean that they didn't believe. They weren't leaving God. So what? Somebody wanted to leave the church. That's okay. It's their prerogative, right? There's nothing wrong with that. If it show me in scripture where it says, leaving a church is a sin. It's not.
no, it's not.
You can leave your work if you want. You can join a different dance group or soccer league.
Mhm.
Um, but you were always, everything was fear based. If you leave, your life will fall apart.
Did you
You
believe
know,
that?
you bet I did. Yeah. And so did many others. And that's why it took so long to leave, because you were made to believe if you leave, you will be cursed. If you don't tithe there, you will be cursed. Your kids will fall apart. Your life will fall apart. Your marriage. And we were all told that. Your finances you'll lose everything. Your life will fall to pieces if you leave third day. And
Who told you this? Just leadership, or it was just kind of incorporated in the sermon?
all of it, all of the above.
Oh, okay.
Great the sermon. That was Francis's, he would say that um, all the time. Many people have told me that have left. Feared. That's one of the reasons it took me so long to leave, because I thought if I did, everything's going to fall apart.
Did it?
No,
No.
things got better.
How
Yeah.
so? In what way?
Oh, they got better because I wasn't under that control anymore. They couldn't control anything in my life anymore. And it got better in the sense that I could make my own choices without having to go to them.
What kind of choices?
Anything. Who I wanted to hang out with. If I wanted to join a group. If I wanted to put my kids in certain things, or it didn't matter what it was. It just, the biggest thing when I left, it was like I felt free, that now I could just live my life. And I'm a good person. I mean, I have always lived my parents raised me to be honest, hardworking, contribute to society. And I've raised my girls that way, and they're great kids. And I just felt such a freedom when I left. And life is life. We're not promised anything in this life. Actually, if you want to believe the Bible, it says you'll have trouble. In John, it says you'll have trouble, but don't fear. He's overcome. And you know what? Life is life, and if bad things can happen when you're in church, and it can happen outside of church, but you don't have to fear, because it's life, and it's okay. You go through stuff, but it's not because you left a church.
And what did leaving do to your spirituality? Or,
You know what? I left a church. I didn't leave God.
so if someone walks away from an organization like this, they won't necessarily leave their faith.
Absolutely not. Nope, absolutely not. I didn't stop believing in God. I'm still working out my faith. And I think that you do that your whole life. You work out your faith. I didn't walk away from God. I had a lot of questions when I left, because I do believe some of their teaching is off, like the fear that they instill in people. Telling you that God will answer your prayers. The more you give, God will answer. I'm going to tell you right now, I journal almost every day, and I do it on purpose to be accountable to myself. And even when people ask me to pray, like my kids will ask me, I have a journal full of things that God has answered. And I didn't give a single penny to third day, and God answered my prayers. And I have it right here. My kids will say to me, Mom, can you write this down and pray about it? And I'm like, you bet I will. And God has answered. I didn't have to give $1,000 or, any of that. So my point is this. I want people to know that if they're on the fence, they're wanting to leave. It's okay. It's okay to leave. Your life won't fall apart. Your kids won't fall apart. Your marriage, your finances, you can leave, and it's going to be okay. You will question some things. You'll question what you were taught. You may even question, some of the friendships you had, if they were genuine, but that's okay. That's okay, because you're going to be okay. I'm okay. I'm great. I'm closer to my family since we've all left. I have great friendships. I have a great job. My kids are doing amazing. So I want people to know that it's okay to leave a church. It doesn't mean you're leaving God. And they may tell others, because they have lied about why people have left. Because I have found out when I was there, you weren't allowed to talk to so-and-so after they left, because they, had done this or done that. And I know that because my family had left before I did. And there were rumors that went around about my sister and I that we were troublemakers. And I found the from an ex member. My sister and I are the furthest from being troublemakers, but that's what the rumor was. The fear they would put, it was horrible.
Yeah.
Fear. That's why so many people have a hard time, and even when they do leave, they're on edge because they think, "Oh my God, when's God's hammer coming down on my head?
Yeah.
When is my, But that's not the case. It never happens that way.
So, if someone's listening to this and they hear your story, but they're like, they want to leave, would it be okay for them to reach out to you?
Absolutely. Yep. I want them to know. I want people to know if they're questioning and they sense that something's not right, or they're going to be okay if they leave.
Yeah.
100% they're going to be okay. 100%. They'll question things after, but they're going to be okay. Their life won't fall apart.
There's a hard process of dealing with a deconstruction of your faith, but once you start to rebuild, I find, at least in my case, I mean, mine was not nearly as drastic as yours. I just saw some preachers online saying some terrible things about the gay community, and I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. But when I deconstructed and reconstructed, I was like, you feel better after.
There is, I'm not going to say there's not a process after you leave. There's definitely a process that you go through.
Yeah.
You do grieve leaving a church because you're so involved. It's such an integral part of your life, right? You give everything. Yeah, you will grieve when you leave. You'll go through all the emotions, anger and even sadness because of some of the friendships lost. You'll question even your faith. You will have a lot of questions, but that's okay to have questions, and it's okay, to reach out to people that have left and listen to their story, because I have found when I started to reach out and talk to other people that had left, it was a very different story from what we were made to believe when we went there. So
it was a different story from what they told you of certain members left.
Yeah. So when it was very like you were made to believe they left because they were in the wrong. So anybody that left was in the wrong.
That was the narrative?
Absolutely. 100%. And you were not to associate with them. After I had left many years later, I had reached out to some of these people, and the story was very different. Good people. And I always knew these people were good. And once talking to them, they had gone through the same thing, a process of, you grieve, you hurt, then, you go through a little bit of anger and just different emotions you go through, but you come out of it stronger. You come out of it almost feeling empowered. And I would even say you almost trust God more, because it's, and I'm not against church at all. I grew up in church my whole life, so I don't have a problem necessarily with, church. I have a problem with control.
I like that message though. And I like that you're coming forward, not just to tell your story, but also to help others. And I said this the other day to Nicole and Ashley and everyone I've spoken with so far. I'm like, the narrative is never, we're out to get these people. We're out to hurt these people because they hurt us. The narrative is, we're going to tell our stories because then maybe they can change. Because a lot of the things that you say brought a lot of feelings of shame and hurt on you are things that are not actually hurtful to anybody, in my opinion. Like when you want to associate with someone you grew up with, but just because they left your particular congregation, that's not hurtful. What's hurtful is you intercepting and telling people they can't associate with that person that they love.
Yeah.
For
And I
what
think a lot of people don't leave for that reason. And I think a lot of people feel very alone after they leave. And I think that's the hardest part. I will say it is hard to leave. And after you go through the process, you're stronger and life is good.
Good.
So,
Thank you so much for coming on and telling your story.
well, thanks for having
And
me.
no problem. I hope, and I know that you definitely have touched people, whether it be from your organization or other organizations like it. And you're brave. I say that to everyone because I don't think I'd be able to do this.
I don't
So,
know that. I think um, I just want to help people if they're feeling, you know, like they need to step out and they're afraid. And, fear is not a good thing. There's a lot of fear in this world today. And you know what? Fear doesn't help the situation. We can't control what's going on in the world, but we can control our emotions and how we deal with it, right? And whether it's, talking about it or being with family, like we can't control what's going on, but we can control how we deal with it and make certain adjustments in our life or whatever we have to do to sort of rise above, this circumstance, right?
yeah.
So there's always hope.
Yeah. So,
I just want people to know that.
thank you again for coming forward and
Yeah,
sharing
thanks.
your story. And I hope that it touches some people. And you can always reach out to Corinne, myself, anyone really who's been on the podcast if you want advice or you need help or you know someone in a similar situation, because you shouldn't be afraid to leave a group, whether it be just a group or a religious organization or a team or whatnot. You shouldn't be afraid. And if you're afraid, then that shows that it might not be the best environment. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.